Seriously, you can't even handle something this simple. You are such a clumsy woman. Why did Kyle marry someone so useless? Deborah's constant criticism was wearing me down. She never used to be like this. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to reach out to Kyle, who was away on a work assignment, but he was no help at all. It's your fault, isn't it? You're the one making Mom angry. He didn't defend me at all. Both Kyle and Deborah had grown colder ever since my father passed away, and the discussion about his inheritance began. Then one day, Kyle surprised me by coming home unexpectedly from his assignment. It was my birthday. Surprise. Happy birthday, Serena. Happy birthday. It had been so long since they had been this kind to me. It would be nice if they could always treat me like this. Their kindness put me in such a good mood. Still, I felt a bit tired and decided to lie down on the sofa. I'm starting to feel a little sleepy. Kyle gently covered me with a blanket as I dozed off on the couch. A little while later, Kyle checked on me and said to Deborah, "All right, it looks like Serena's out cold. She doesn't suspect a thing." This is hilarious. But I wasn't asleep. Kyle thought I was completely asleep and started whispering suspiciously with Deborah. Pretending to sleep, I listened carefully to their conversation. Then I discovered they were planning something unimaginable. Terrified, I continued to feign sleep as best as I could. I am Serena, a municipal employee. I met my husband, Kyle, who works in an office, at a speed dating event. We hit it off immediately and got married. Both Kyle and my mother-in-law, Deborah, insisted that I continue working after we got married. They often told me things like, "Serena, you have such a respectable job as a public servant. You shouldn't quit. It would be such a waste." Exactly. It's a stable career. And having multiple income sources is better, isn't it? They voiced their opinions without hesitation. But, truthfully, I had planned to scale back on work after marriage, especially with the thought of starting a family. However, when I brought up the idea of having children, Kyle said, "I'm not really interested in having kids." "I see," I replied, disheartened. With that, I decided to continue working. 6 months after we got married, Kyle received a transfer order and had to move for his job. "I've been reassigned to a new location, so we'll need to move." "What? Moving? That's so sudden." "Well, I'll come with you," I said, ready to relocate with him. But Kyle quickly dismissed the idea. "What, Serena, you're thinking of coming with me?" No. What about your job? I could quit and take up part-time work, or we could figure something out." But Kyle wouldn't allow it. "Quitting your job is out of the question. It would be such a waste. Besides, I've already arranged to share an apartment with a colleague. There's no room for you to stay." Kyle began preparing for his move alone. And just as Kyle moved out, Deborah moved into her home in his place. "What? Deborah is moving in here. Nice to see you, dear. I'll be staying here from now on." I was completely caught off guard. Without consulting me, Kyle welcomed Deborah and said, "Glad you're here, Mom. Stay as long as you want." "Deborah, why did you suddenly decide to move in with us?" I asked, still in shock. "Well, my husband has been cheating on me. I can't stand to see his face anymore." "What? That straight-laced Henry had an affair?" Those words left me completely stunned. "That's right. I couldn't stand it anymore. That's why I decided to move here, so I wouldn't have to face him again." She claimed she had separated from Henry because of his infidelity, but I found it hard to believe that the straight-laced Henry would ever cheat. Henry having an affair. What could have possibly happened? Sometime after Deborah moved into her home, I ran into my father-in-law, Henry, in town. "Well, if it isn't Serena, how have you been?" He greeted me warmly. "Oh, Henry, It's been a while. Henry is a polite and kind man. Thinking he might be worried about Deborah, I decided to casually bring her up during our small talk. Deborah's been relaxing at our house. Is that so? I hope Debbie hasn't been bothering you. Then, during the conversation, I casually brought up the topic of infidelity with Henry, which had been on my mind. The person most surprised by this revelation was Henry himself. Henry, visibly taken aback, exclaimed, "What, me, having an affair?" She said that. His reaction made it clear that the accusation was likely false. "Yes, Deborah said so." Henry chuckled dryly and said, "That's not what I heard." Why would Debbie lie about something like that? According to Henry, Deborah had told him a completely different story. She said she wanted to stay with you so you wouldn't feel lonely after Kyle moved away. That's what Deborah had told him. Why would Debbie come up with such a story? It doesn't make any sense, Henry said, shaking his head. Before we parted ways, Henry reassured me, "I'm not sure what Debbie is thinking, but if you ever need help, don't hesitate to reach out to me." Henry, being a lawyer, had a calm and reliable demeanor. Months later, my father fell critically ill. Hearing the news, Kyle took time off work and rushed back home to be with me. My father was a wealthy man. Not long after, my critically ill father passed away. For context, my mother had passed away many years earlier. With my father's death, the family gathered to discuss the inheritance. Eventually, all the legal proceedings were finalized. Finally home. What a long day. Exhausted from the funeral and legal procedures. Walking through the door, Kyle impatiently asked, "So, Serena, how much did you inherit?" Surprised by his directness, I answered, "I inherited a quarter of the estate." Kyle's expression instantly changed. "A quarter? That's it? What happened to the rest?" he demanded, his tone growing irritated. "What do you mean, that's it?" "We divided it fairly among the family." "Divided it? You mean you didn't get the whole inheritance?" "No, I didn't. We split it among the siblings." Hearing my response, Kyle inexplicably grew angry. "Siblings? Are you serious? And the inheritance is that small? What was even the point of me coming back?" It seemed Kyle had assumed I, being motherless, would inherit my father's entire estate, but in reality, I was the youngest of 4 siblings. Kyle, unfamiliar with my family, hadn't known I had brothers and sisters. "What are you even saying? Why are you so obsessed with my father's inheritance? The funeral just ended. How insensitive can you be?" Still grieving, I lashed out at Kyle, in anger. My words left him speechless. However, from that day on, Deborah's behavior toward me changed drastically. "Seriously, you can't even handle something this simple. You are such a clumsy woman. Why did Kyle marry someone so useless?" Deborah's constant criticism was wearing me down. What had gotten into Deborah? She wasn't like this before. How could I endure this day after day? Desperate, I reached out to Kyle, who was still away for work, but he showed no interest in helping me. When I told him about Deborah's behavior, he dismissed it coldly. "It's probably your fault. You're the one upsetting Mom," he said, refusing to defend me at all. Kyle and Deborah both seemed to grow colder toward me after the topic of the inheritance came up. Then one day, Kyle returned home unexpectedly, surprising me. I was startled to see him appear at the entrance. "Kyle, what are you doing here so suddenly?" "Serena, I'm home. Did I surprise you? It was my birthday." "Surprise. Happy birthday, Serena." "Happy birthday." With that, Kyle and Deborah warmly celebrated my birthday, smiling all the while. It had been so long since they had treated me so kindly. It would be nice if they could always treat me like this. Their kindness put me in such a good mood. However, I started to feel a bit tired, so I pretended to be tipsy and lay down on the sofa. I'm starting to feel a little sleepy. Kyle laughed as he watched me. Hey, don't fall asleep there, or you'll catch a cold, he said, gently draping a blanket over me. A little while later, Kyle checked on me and whispered to Deborah, "Looks like Serena is asleep now." But I wasn't asleep. Thinking I was completely out, Kyle began speaking quietly with Deborah. Pretending to sleep, I listened carefully to their conversation. That's when I uncovered their unbelievable plan. What? What on earth are they planning? I need to contact Henry right away. Terrified by their sinister plot, I continued pretending to sleep while frantically messaging Henry on WhatsApp. 10 minutes later, their conversation finally ended. They stood over me as I lay on the sofa. Completely clueless, isn't she? Utterly oblivious. With those words, Kyle and Deborah exchanged a laugh. Shaking with fear, I continued to pretend to be asleep. The next morning, Deborah was in the kitchen, as if nothing had happened. Curious about what she was cooking, I peeked in and saw her preparing shepherd's pie. "Oh, Serena, good morning." Noticing me, Deborah greeted me cheerfully with a bright smile. Her unusually good mood was unsettling, almost eerie. Though her oddly pleasant demeanor raised my suspicions, I managed to maintain my composure and returned her greeting calmly. "Good morning. Oh, Deborah, are you making shepherd's pie?" She smiled widely and answered, "That's right. Henry loves shepherd's pie, so I thought I'd make it for him. Oh, but the recipe is a family secret, so I can't let you see how I make it." She continued cooking with a strange sense of satisfaction, relieved that she didn't seem to realize I had overheard their conversation the night before. I kept observing. Deborah had claimed she left Henry because of his infidelity. Was she planning to reconcile with him now? "Have you made up with Henry?" I asked cautiously. "No, not yet," she replied, shaking her head. "But I've decided that since he's just a man, it might be forgivable if he had a momentary lapse in judgment. I think it's time to make amends," she added with a soft smile. "I see. I knew from Henry that the infidelity story was a lie, but it was clear that Deborah was genuinely making the shepherd's pie for him. Her insistence on keeping the recipe a secret also caught my attention. It felt like Deborah was up to something. But for now, I told her I was heading to work, and I left the house. "Well, I'm off to work now." "All right, dear. Have a great day at work," Deborah replied, cheerfully seeing me off. Once I left the house, I began to think. After overhearing Deborah and Kyle's terrifying plan last night while pretending to sleep, I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was clearly wrong, and I feared for Henry's safety. With that thought, I decided to discreetly contact my workplace. "I'm sorry, but I'm feeling unwell today and won't be able to come in." My worry about Deborah's behavior outweighed my guilt for lying. For the first time in my life, I pretended to be sick to skip work. For the first time in my life, I lied about being sick to take a day off from work. But this time, I had no choice. Though I felt a pang of guilt, I pushed those feelings aside, turned around, and headed back to the house to secretly observe Deborah. "All right, it's done. Hey, hey, hey." It seemed she had finished making her dish. Deborah stood there, staring at the shepherd's pie with a strange, almost sinister smile. "Looks like the shepherd's pie is ready. Is she planning to leave the house soon?" Deborah carefully packed the pie into a Tupperware container and began preparing to head out. A short while later, I saw Deborah appear at the entrance. There she is, leaving the house. Time to follow her. I quickly hailed a taxi and began tailing her. Deborah seemed completely unaware that she was being followed. "All right, let's keep this up." Judging by the direction, she's definitely heading to Henry's place. But then, something unexpected happened. Wait, who's that? I whispered to myself as I watched from a distance. To my surprise, Kyle appeared and met up with Deborah. What? That's Kyle. Why is he here? Kyle and Deborah exchanged glances, and Kyle gave a sly smile. Mom, is everything ready? Of course. Look, I even made this early morning, Deborah replied, holding up the Tupperware filled with shepherd's pie. Kyle nodded in approval. Good. Everything's set. Let's head to Dad's. The two of them began walking together toward Henry's house. Kyle had claimed he had work and left early this morning, so why was he here now? And why was he meeting with Deborah? Puzzled, I continued tailing them. Eventually, the two of them arrived at Henry's house. All right, let's stick to the plan. Okay, leave it to me. They called out to Henry, who was likely inside. Henry, I'm back. Dad, are you here? The two of them searched for Henry and eventually found him relaxing in the garden. Dad, I'm home. Oh, what brings the two of you here together? Henry asked, his expression puzzled. Kyle, don't you have work today? It's unusual for you to come by at this hour. Oh, I had some things come up, so I took the day off, Kyle replied, making an unconvincing excuse. Deborah quickly shifted the focus. By the way, are you hungry? I made your favorite shepherd's pie. Please, have some, she said, leading Henry to the dining room. She handed Henry the Tupperware she had brought. Doesn't it look delicious? Oh, it looks wonderful. It's been so long since you made something for me, Debbie. What's the occasion? Henry said, his face lighting up with delight. You're not up to something, are you? I don't have any money to give you, Henry joked. Deborah responded with a sly grin. Can't I just do something nice for you once in a while? I worked hard on this special shepherd's pie for you. With that, Deborah gave a sly smile. Oh, I see. Thank you, I appreciate it, Henry said, seemingly oblivious to the look on Deborah's face as he prepared a plate and fork. Then, turning to Kyle, Henry said, All right, Kyle, you go ahead and take the first bite, offering him the shepherd's pie that Deborah had made. What, me? Kyle's face tensed up. You're making Kyle it. Deborah's face also froze in alarm. No, this is something Mom made just for Dad, Kyle stammered, refusing to eat. Exactly. I made it for you, not him, Deborah interjected hastily. But Henry was persistent. Come on, don't be difficult. Take the first bite. The shepherd's pie looks delicious. What's the matter? Let's all enjoy it together. Kyle tried desperately to deflect. I'm not really hungry right now. Dad, you should have it all. Don't be silly. Just take one bite. Surely, you can manage that. Come on, Mom made it. The back and forth of eat it and no, I won't continued between the three. Enough already. Deborah finally snapped, unable to contain her frustration. Just shut up and eat it already, she shouted, grabbing the shepherd's pie and trying to force it into Henry's mouth. Hey, what are you doing? Stop that, Henry exclaimed, pushing Deborah away. Be quiet and eat it. I told you, I worked hard on this all morning, Deborah screamed, but Henry's strength overpowered her, and she gave up. Why won't you eat it? Deborah yelled, clearly losing her composure. Henry, calm but firm, asked her quietly, Why are you so desperate for me to eat this shepherd's pie? And why won't Kyle even touch it? Deborah and Kyle fell silent at the question. You both show up at this hour, push this dish on me, and even try to force me to eat it. What exactly are the two of you plotting? The silence between Deborah and Kyle was deafening. Finally, breaking the tension, Henry said, By the way, Kyle and Deborah, I have something important to discuss with you. Let's address that before we eat." With that, Henry pulled out his smartphone. With that, Henry played the audio recording. It was a conversation from the previous night between Kyle and Deborah. "What? That's our voices from last night," Kyle stammered, panic spreading across his face. The recording revealed the entire plan. Kyle and Deborah had conspired to get rid of Henry, steal his inheritance, and frame me completely unaware of their scheme for the crime. Damn it, they overheard us. Henry knew about the plan. That's why he refused to eat my shepherd's pie. Deborah muttered angrily, frustration evident in her voice. "Did you really think I didn't know?" Henry shouted, and they froze, caught off guard by his revelation. Watching the scene from outside, I decided the time had come. It looks like it's starting. As Henry began to confront the two of them, I made my way inside to support him. "Your plan has failed. Give it up, Serena." Both of them gasped, visibly shocked to see me. "Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be at work? How are you here? Have you been working with Dad all along?" The truth was, their entire conversation had been broadcast to Henry via WhatsApp video call. While pretending to sleep last night, I had secretly contacted Henry and let him in on their plot. "Kyle, Deborah, your plan is completely exposed," I said, my voice unwavering. "I overheard everything, and Henry knows about your scheme too." I stared them down. "What? That's unfair. You knew and just let us carry on," Kyle shouted, trying to deflect blame. "You were just stringing us along." I turned to Kyle and asked pointedly, "By the way, Kyle, why are you here? Didn't you say you were at work?" Caught off guard, Kyle hesitated. "Well, that's," he stammered, unable to come up with a convincing excuse. I pressed on, determined to expose the truth. "Should I say it for you? Your so-called job was a lie, wasn't it? You've been lying all along." Kyle's supposed job transfer had been a fabrication. Kyle had quit his job shortly after we got married. He had been living off Deborah's Social Security and part-time income. That's why they were so adamant that I shouldn't quit my job. Realizing his cover was blown, Kyle scowled at me. "So you knew the whole time, huh? You're such a sneaky little." Pretending not to know, he sneered, shifting to outright defiance. "Yeah, I quit. I figured once your dad died, you'd inherit everything, and we'd be set for life." Kyle brazenly confessed his reasons for quitting. But his plan had unraveled when he discovered I'd only inherited a quarter of the estate. "What? Only a quarter? That's way less than I calculated. How are we supposed to live on that?" Kyle blurted out in frustration. Henry, who had been calmly listening, finally spoke. "Even if Serena had inherited everything, as her husband, you wouldn't see a single cent of it." Kyle's jaw dropped in disbelief. "What? Is that true? You're always so selfish, Kyle. Depending on someone else's family inheritance, your thinking is so self-centered and naive." Henry scolded Kyle harshly. The truth behind Deborah and Henry's separation also came to light. Henry had often warned Deborah about coddling Kyle too much. One day, Henry had chastised Kyle for his laziness, and Deborah had stepped in. "Why are you being so hard on Kyle again? Can't you see how unfair you're being to him?" But Henry stood his ground. "Debbie, coddling Kyle won't help him. Even if he's our son, you have to correct him when he's wrong. You're always so rigid and overbearing. If you keep forcing Kyle to live such a strict life every day, he'll suffocate." Deborah had shouted in anger at Henry's insistence that she stop coddling Kyle, storming out of the house in frustration. That was the true reason for their separation. But Henry wasn't wrong, he was merely being reasonable. Henry didn't say anything wrong, I thought, smiling wryly at the irony of their fight. Why did Kyle grow up to be so selfish and spineless? Initially, Henry hadn't even known that Kyle had quit his job. You quit your job to depend on your wife's money. You've fallen so far, Kyle. And now this. Henry let out a heavy sigh, clearly disheartened. By the way, Kyle, about the apartment you rented under the pretense of a work transfer, you're living there with your mistress, aren't you? I confronted Kyle. What? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't bother denying it. I know everything. And of course, Deborah, you knew about the mistress too, didn't you? What? I have no idea what you mean, Deborah replied, her eyes darting away to avoid mine. But her reaction confirmed my suspicion. She had known all along. It became clear to me that Kyle and Deborah's plan was to frame me, divorce me, and let Kyle marry his mistress. Sensing their scheme, I sought Henry's advice. Henry, I need your help. Something about Kyle's behavior doesn't feel right. Through Henry's connections, I hired a skilled private investigator to look into Kyle. The investigation uncovered not only Kyle's affair, but also the fact that he had quit his job long ago. Cornered by the evidence, Kyle lashed out in frustration. It seems you know too much now. Desperate, Kyle grabbed a knife and lunged toward me. Do it, Kyle. Get rid of that insolent woman, Deborah shouted, holding Henry down to prevent him from intervening. But a voice boomed from the doorway. Stop right there. At that moment, police officers burst into the room. Although Henry now worked as a lawyer, he was previously a prosecutor. He still had many connections in the police force and had informed them of the situation, arranging for them to be on standby. Damn it, it's the cops. Kyle, run, Deborah shouted, letting Kyle escape from the scene. But before Deborah could act, Kyle had already fled, leaving her behind. What, Kyle? However, officers stationed outside quickly apprehended him. In the end, both Kyle and Deborah were arrested on charges of attempted murder. Kyle, being shoved into the police vehicle, resisted and shouted angrily, "You'll pay for this." Hey, that's a criminal threat. That'll only make things worse for you, Henry quipped lightly beside me, brushing off his son's outburst. Deborah, always indulgent with Kyle, still tried to defend him. It's my fault. My son only did it because I ordered him to. However, Kyle, seizing the opportunity, tried to shift all the blame onto Deborah. That's right. It's all Mom's fault, he shouted, making a scene as he was taken away. After watching the two of them get taken into custody, I felt a sudden wave of relief and collapsed to the ground. Henry caught me and supported me. Are you all right? You did the right thing by letting me know. Inside the shepherd's pie Deborah had made, investigators found pieces of a utility knife blade and shards of glass. After everything was resolved, I successfully divorced Kyle. Now, with the ordeal behind me, I continue to work at the municipal office. On my days off, I prepare meals and bring them to Henry. I still feel deeply grateful to him. You don't need to bother with an old fool like me now that you and Kyle are no longer together, Henry said bashfully. But to me, Henry reminds me of my late father. For that reason, I intend to continue showing my appreciation to Henry for a while longer, as a way of expressing my filial gratitude.
Pretend you need to use the restroom and escape.
Under the table, my brother, Patrick, nudged my foot with his smartphone, secretly showing me the screen. It seemed he wanted to get me out of this situation. 3 years into our marriage, I finally got to introduce my brother Patrick to my husband Randolph. However, Patrick's face clouded within seconds of meeting Randolph, and he rudely ignored the conversation to stuff his face with the snacks in front of him. That cake looks delicious. Riley, why don't you go to the restroom for a bit? Wait, What are you planning to do with my cake? One piece didn't seem enough. I'm a bit hungry. Can we talk after I eat this? Patrick, being a detective, wasn't one to do things without reason. There must be a purpose behind Patrick's actions, but I couldn't grasp it. I headed to the restroom to gather my thoughts. After considering, I decided not to run away and returned to the living room. When I sat next to Patrick, he gave me a furious look as if to say, "Why did you come back?" I had taken some precautions, so I hoped he wouldn't be too angry. It seemed those precautions worked, as the doorbell rang after a while. When I checked the monitor, I finally understood his intentions. Randolph was apparently a terrible person. In that case, in this situation, Randolph would be facing severe consequences. I am Riley. I'm 35 years old and work in sales. I married my husband Randolph 3 years ago, and we don't have children yet. I also have a younger brother named Patrick, whom I haven't seen in a while. He didn't run away from home or have any complicated family issues, it was because of work. Patrick works as a cop on a small, sparsely populated island. Normally, cops on the island work in shifts of 2 or 3 to cover 24 hours, but he is the only cop there. That's why he can't come home often. Patrick became a cop partly because our dad was one, but also because he always had a strong sense of justice. When I was in 8th grade and Patrick was in 6th grade, we once witnessed a man shoplifting bread and drinks at a grocery store. "Hey, he's putting it inside his clothes. I'm going to warn him."
Wait. Didn't Dad say you should catch shoplifters only after they've left the store without paying? Otherwise, they might say they were going to pay at the register.
Patrick was about to confront the shoplifter, but I grabbed his arm to stop him. I felt like a police officer ready to catch the shoplifter, fully immersed in the role. He seemed to feel the same, breathing excitedly. While we watched, trying not to be noticed, the man walked past the register and out of the store. Patrick and I ran after him. "Excuse me." "What?" We caught up to him a little distance from the store, and Patrick called out to him. The man stopped and turned to look at us. It was then I realized how dangerous what we were doing could be. As we got closer, the man looked bigger than I had thought, and I began to worry, is it safe for us middle schoolers to confront a shoplifter? I felt the sense of being a police officer fall away, leaving me just a trembling middle schooler. "Can you tell me the way to the nearest bus stop?" "Oh, I'll talk to him. Riley, you go to the restroom." "Don't embarrass me in front of people." "Fine, I'll go." Patrick, quick thinking as always, saved me from my trembling fear. I fought the urge to run and instead slowly made my way to the grocery store restroom, pretending that was my destination. Once inside the grocery store, I reported the situation to an employee. One male staff member went to Patrick and the others, while another listened to my story and quickly checked the surveillance camera recordings. Just as I described, the camera clearly showed the theft, with the shoplifter failing to pass items through the register. Once confirmed, I went back to Patrick with the male employee. When we arrived, the shoplifter was shouting loudly. It seemed he realized he was caught when the employee arrived, and he was making a last-ditch effort. The camera caught the moment of the theft. "Could you come to the office and discuss it with us?" Upon hearing about the evidence, the shoplifter, realizing he was caught, obediently followed the male employee back into the store. Afterward, the staff thanked me, but I never found out what happened to the shoplifter. On the way home, Patrick apologized to me. "I'm sorry. That was dangerous. If the employee hadn't come, we might have been attacked by the shoplifter and he could have gotten away. It was my fault. Acting like a cop. It was thoughtless of me. I'm sorry." Until we got home, Patrick and I didn't speak at all. That night, our dad scolded us severely after hearing the story. In situations like that, get an adult to call the police. You never know what a criminal might do. Never do something so dangerous again. Patrick and I shrank as we listened to Dad's very reasonable lecture. I secretly think this was the event that inspired Patrick to pursue a career in law enforcement. Patrick probably wanted to be able to catch bad people himself. He not only has a strong sense of justice, but also a personality that cannot leave people in trouble alone. Wow, people live on such small islands too. If they're struggling without doctors, they might be struggling without police too. One day, Patrick was watching a documentary about a doctor who moved to a remote island to help its residents. Inspired by this program, middle school he set a goal to become a police officer who would protect the peace of such islands. He did indeed become a cop and now works on a remote island. Achieving his goal, he takes great pride in his work. However, he prioritizes his job too much, often neglecting his family, which is a small flaw of his. He says, "If I leave the island, I won't be able to respond if something happens," and he has stopped coming home, only contacting us occasionally. I think it's been 5 or 6 years since I last saw him. Nonetheless, my parents and I are proud of Patrick for working for the people, so we accept it. However, I really wanted him to be there for my wedding. I got married 3 years ago. We met in the most ordinary way, through a mutual acquaintance. Randolph is serious, works in sales, and is highly successful. He's already being given significant responsibilities with great expectations for his future. I also work in sales, but his achievements are far beyond mine. I wanted to boast about my wonderful husband Randolph to Patrick, but since he couldn't attend the wedding, I ended up just sending a photo. Normally, I'd be furious at him for not attending his sister's wedding, but Patrick had unavoidable circumstances at that time. Apparently, the day before the wedding, there was a report that a drunken assault suspect had fled to the island where he was stationed. Under such circumstances, he couldn't possibly leave the island. The suspect was later caught, and he called to apologize. "Riley, I'm sorry. I intended to come, but I just couldn't leave the island." "It's okay. You never come back, but someday you will, right? I'll introduce you to Randolph then. Or maybe we should come to the island." "Oh, come on, don't do that. I don't want to disrupt your newlywed life, and if I bring Randolph to a place like this, Riley might get mad at me for taking him to such a remote place. He's not that kind of person." In the end, the suggestion to visit was declined, and Patrick meeting Randolph was postponed to someday. I decided to enjoy my newlywed life, taking his words to heart. However, my married life gradually turned out to be different from what I had imagined. When I started living with Randolph after getting married, I expected a sweet newlywed life. But Randolph prioritized work, and our newlywed life turned out to be different from what I had envisioned.
So, I'm going to bed first.
Okay, good night. Leaving Randolph in the living room reading a book, I headed to the bedroom alone. Randolph would come home from work, have dinner, take a shower, and then work on his materials or read business books until late at night. At this time, there was an overwhelming aura of "don't talk to me." It was as if there was an invisible wall around Randolph. On weekends, he would go out for dinner with clients in the evening or play futsal or golf early in the morning. On days when he went fishing, he would leave early in the morning and come back late at night. Meeting outside of work helps build trust quickly. As a salesperson, you should be aware of that. The key, he said, was not to talk about work. I understood that his success at work was built on hard work. He would work or study tirelessly, even on weekends. During Thanksgiving or Christmas, he would be delighted to secure uninterrupted time to study. As a result, although I wanted to visit our families with Randolph occasionally, it never happened. It's good to work hard. I heard some wives complain about their husbands not working at all. Compared to their problems, my complaint about Randolph being too dedicated to his work might be a luxury. But since we were newlyweds, I wanted him to spend a little more time with me. Having gotten married, I wanted to have children, but Randolph said, if we have a child now, it will affect my work, and continued to avoid it. When I brought up the topic of children, it made me seem desperate, as if I was craving them. Moreover, Randolph, always tired from work, would handle things in a rather perfunctory manner. Are we really a married couple? I began to question while looking at the ring on my left hand. He seemed to be the type not to feed the fish he caught. Before marriage, I thought he was kind, but my impression of Randolph changed significantly after getting married. Since the newlywed period is unique to this time, my dissatisfaction with his gradually grew. However, since Randolph was just working hard, I didn't want to be that annoying woman who says, "What's more important, your work or me?" So, I tried subtly to see if Randolph truly cared about me.
There was a molestation incident around here. Should I be more careful when coming home?
You're over 30 now, so you don't need to worry. Randolph's words made me feel uneasy. I should probably be more worried than I thought. I decided to express my feelings a bit more clearly. You always seem to be working, even when you're at home. But isn't that taking a toll on your body? Maybe you should rest sometimes. I mean, we're newlyweds. Shouldn't we try to have more of a married life? I'm in my mid-30s now, and I'll be in my 40s before I know it. Now is the time to push myself at work. I have to become the sales manager. I don't want to just be a cog in the sales department. I want to be the one running the whole show, making the entire team excel. It's frustrating when people think anyone can do sales. Sure, engineers, lawyers, doctors, they do jobs that not everyone can do, but that doesn't mean sales should be looked down upon. Randolph, who usually stays quiet at home, absorbed in making reports or reading books, was unusually talkative. Our work challenges were on different levels. While I struggled with monthly sales targets, Randolph had grander ambitions. I found myself unable to say anything to him. I began to think, maybe supporting Randolph is the right thing to do. So, I started to make sure not to disturb him while he studied at home. I would wake up at 4 a.m. to prepare breakfast and get Randolph ready when he had early morning fishing or golf outings. A year into our marriage, after dedicating myself to supporting Randolph's work. Hey, isn't dinner ready yet? I expect it to be ready when I get home. I'm sorry. I got home a little late because of work. You don't have a demanding job. If you're late, it's because you're not competent enough. You need to work harder. It's not that. It's just a busy season. People who can't handle their job always blame others. If you can't do housework because of your job, then quit. We don't have kids yet, so we can live on my salary. Randolph had turned into a domineering husband. He would get angry if dinner wasn't ready when he got home. He would get upset if I took a shower or went to bed before he got home late. No matter how early he needed to get up for fishing or golf, if I didn't wake up first and prepare breakfast, he would get mad. And he belittled me, saying I was bad at my job, despite never seeing my work directly or being my boss. Sure, compared to him, who was hardworking and talented, I might seem less competent. But I was doing my best and considered myself average. If you want to talk back, prove yourself with results at work. These words made me feel inferior to Randolph, and I couldn't respond. If people saw my pathetic state, they would say, "This is moral harassment. You should stand up for yourself, or I couldn't endure this. I'd get a divorce." But he wasn't always cruel. He could be kind at times. "Welcome home. You're back early today." "Yeah. Today's fishing trip wasn't too far. Look, I caught a bass. Dinner isn't ready yet, right? I'll handle it. You take a break for a change." Randolph opened the fridge to see what he could cook besides fish. Tonight, I could relax on the sofa and wait for dinner to be ready. Moments like these made it impossible for me to dislike Randolph. Watching kind Randolph from behind, I thought, Randolph is just tough on work. He's working hard, and it's wrong of me to complain. Another year passed just like that, and our second year of marriage came to an end. Our third year of married life began. One day, after Randolph left as usual and I was alone at home, I sat on the sofa and reflected on the past 2 years and a bit of our married life. It's strange. There are no memories. The only thing that comes to mind is me doing housework for Randolph while working. As for good memories, the only ones that barely come to mind are our wedding, honeymoon, and the excitement I felt when we moved into this house and started our newlywed life. I realized that while I had been accumulating dissatisfaction with Randolph, I had been deceiving myself by thinking, this is something that can't be helped, this is something I should endure. Realizing this made me disillusioned with Randolph. But since we're married, it's not something that can be simply resolved with a goodbye. I shouldn't rush to a conclusion, but rather start by facing Randolph and my own feelings. I began to seriously think about the future, and it felt as if the part of me that had drifted away was coming back. The next day, out of the blue, I got a call from Patrick after a long time. "Patrick, it's been a long time. Almost 100 years, right?" "A bit over 2 years. Actually, I'm moving back there." "Moving back? You mean leaving the island?" "Yes, a new officer is coming, so I have to move back, and I'll be transferring from the community section to the detective section." "Really? So you'll be a detective like Dad?" "Well, at first it'll probably be all grunt work. And since I'm moving back, introduce me to Randolph." Randolph. Randolph, huh. Since I was thinking a lot about Randolph at that time, my subtle reaction must have been noticeable over the phone. It's not like right away. I'll be busy with work for a while after moving back, so it'll be a bit later. That's not the point.
What's wrong? Did something happen?
As if to confirm my current situation and feelings, I explained to Patrick about the past 2 years and a bit of my married life. Since I hadn't talked to anyone about my marital problems with Randolph, including feeling belittled at work and having a domineering husband, my dissatisfaction with Randolph flowed out surprisingly smoothly. After listening to my story, Patrick gave me some very police-like advice. "Isn't that moral harassment?" "I thought you'd say that. But he's kind sometimes, too." "That's a typical case of a woman who can't leave a guy who does moral harassment or DV. It's like you're in a brainwashed state with a mix of rewards and punishments." But every time Patrick gave me advice, I countered with but after but. At this point, I was likely already in the brainwashed state Patrick described. Even understanding that, my but didn't stop. "In the end, it's up to Riley to decide what to do. If you don't want to leave, that's your freedom too." After talking a lot about Randolph with Patrick, he handed down an extreme conclusion. I regretted being so annoying with my but after but. But, if I think about it, I don't have to come to a conclusion right now. Meet him once. Then let me know what you think. Got it. Patrick replied, sounding a bit annoyed. Knowing I was being an annoying sister, I felt sorry. That night, I told Randolph that Patrick was coming over. My brother is coming to our house next time. We've been married for 3 years, but you've never met him, right? What? Isn't he a cop just like Scott? Yes, he is. And he's about to become a detective soon. Is home not okay? Would it be better outside?
No, home is fine. So, when is he coming?
He said that even when he gets back here, he'll be too busy with work to settle down for a while, so it'll probably be more than a month. Randolph seemed nervous about meeting Patrick for the first time. I was also feeling a bit anxious, remembering the time I introduced Randolph to my family when we got married. A month later, Patrick came to our house. This is Randolph. Nice to meet you. Likewise, nice to meet you. I apologize for the delay in introducing myself. When I led Patrick into the living room, Randolph stood up from the sofa to greet him. Patrick returned Randolph's greeting, but his expression darkened when I introduced them, and he froze for a moment at the living room entrance. I panicked, wondering if Patrick had judged Randolph to be a useless man within 2 seconds of meeting him. However, after another 2 seconds, Patrick's expression was filled with the same sense of justice he had when he confronted a shoplifter back in middle school. Patrick's expression concerned me, but after confirming that they had finished their brief greetings, I guided Patrick to the living room table. Patrick sat next to me, with Randolph sitting across from him. I had already prepared tea and snacks for everyone at the table. That cherry pie looks delicious. Riley, why don't you go to the restroom for a bit? Hey, what are you planning to do with my cherry pie? One piece doesn't seem enough. I'm a bit hungry. Can we talk after I eat this? Sorry about that. He likes cherry pie, so I prepared it, but that might have been a mistake. It's good he's not a difficult person. Patrick smiled innocently like a child, prioritizing the cherry pie over his conversation with Randolph. I thought to myself, even if he's family, isn't this behavior rude for a first meeting while showing a slightly displeased expression? At the same time, I wondered, Patrick wasn't such an ill-mannered person before, and tilted my head in confusion. There must have been some reason behind Patrick's words. However, not understanding it, I tilted my head even more. Patrick glanced at me as my head tilted more, then under the table, he opened a messaging app on his smartphone and started typing at an incredible speed. When the text was ready, he nudged my leg with his smartphone under the table and secretly showed it to me. Pretend to go to the restroom and leave. Patrick seemed to want to get me out of there. I understood his intent, but not the reason. However, I knew that Patrick, being a detective, wouldn't do something meaningless in such a situation.
You know, when you said earlier, go to the restroom, you really made me feel like I needed to go.
I left the living room and headed to the restroom, thinking about what Patrick was trying to do, whether I should leave the house instead of returning to the living room, and many other things. If Patrick told me to leave, does that mean there's a potential danger to me? But then, does that mean Randolph is dangerous? Could that be? If Randolph were dangerous, would it be okay to leave him alone with Patrick? If Patrick wanted to talk to Randolph, wouldn't it be better for me to be there since I know more about Randolph? Although Patrick told me to leave, I decided to return to the living room. It took you long enough. It's rude to keep Patrick waiting, you know? Isn't it ruder that Patrick suddenly started eating the cake? And Randolph, it's not polite to say a woman takes too long in the restroom. When I returned to the living room, Patrick looked at me with surprise in his eyes. As I sat down next to Patrick again, he gave me an angry look, asking with his eyes, "Why did you come back?" I hoped he wouldn't be too angry since I had taken some precautions. Besides, if he kept that expression, whatever Patrick was planning might be sensed by Randolph.
The phone's ringing.
Huh? Oh. I'll take it outside. His phone rang at the perfect timing, giving me an opportunity to get him out of the living room. Once he stepped out, he would be able to regain his composure.
I'm really sorry about my brother's manners.
I thought he'd be more serious since he's a cop.
Just because he's a cop doesn't mean he's always serious in his private life.
While I made some harmless small talk to fill the time, Patrick came back looking much calmer. He seemed to have regained his composure.
We once caught a shoplifter together, Riley and I.
Handling that at such a young age. Even after Patrick came back, the small talk continued. It was surprisingly normal and uneventful. Dad got really mad at us back then. Since Patrick kept the conversation going, I joined in. But I was worried, unsure if this was the right move since I didn't understand Patrick's intentions. Minutes passed with nothing happening. As my anxiety grew, the doorbell suddenly rang. When I checked the monitor to see who it was, I finally understood Patrick's plan. Patrick checked the monitor and then looked at me, signaling with his eyes.
It looks like they've arrived. Come with me.
What?
Just come on. There are things I need to confirm.
Randolph, looking puzzled, tilted his head as he followed us to the front door. Who are you? When Randolph opened the door, his confusion only deepened, and he tilted his head even more. Outside, there were 2 men and a car. I had a good idea of who these men were.
Aren't these guys detectives?
Detectives? But they're not in uniform.
Detectives aren't the same as police officers. They often wear plain clothes.
Oh, really? But why are detectives here? When I revealed that the men were detectives, Randolph's expression shifted from confusion to shock. I could see beads of sweat forming on his forehead. I still didn't know why the detectives were here, but I could explain why I had called them.
I called the police station. Patrick secretly told me to pretend to go to the restroom and escape. So, I thought it was an emergency.
When you came back, I was surprised. I was planning to question Randolph after Riley left the house. There was a chance he might get violent.
There's no way I could understand all that from pretend to go to the restroom and escape. That's why I called the police. When we caught that shoplifter in middle school, Dad told us to contact an adult or the police in an emergency. So, I told them my detective brother told me to escape.
After that, I got a call from the police station to confirm. I asked them to send a few officers.
Oh, so that call was from the police station.
Patrick and I solved one question after another. However, the most important question remained unanswered. Just as I was about to ask, Randolph, who had been ignored, interrupted. Don't you dare make decisions behind my back. How did you figure out I was a criminal? The moment the detectives showed up at our door, I had a hunch that Randolph had done something wrong. However, the real question was, what did he have done? I stayed silent, intently listening to the conversation between Patrick and Randolph to uncover the answer. I just got back to this area recently and was getting updated on the local incidents. Among them, there was a series of sexual assaults believed to be committed by the same person. These incidents occurred in 2 places. One was a bit away from this house. The other was near the place where Randolph lived before he got married. I learned about Randolph's previous residence from a call with Riley. Strangely enough, the sexual assaults in the area where Randolph used to live suddenly stopped around the time he got married and moved. No way! Sexual assaults? I felt the blood drain from my face at this shocking revelation. That could just be a coincidence, right? The sketch made from the victims' descriptions looks exactly like Randolph. Not only that, but the physical characteristics also match perfectly. Riley sent me photos from their wedding, but it didn't click until I saw Randolph in person. It's one of those things where you need to see the actual face to realize it. I also sent those photos to my colleagues at the station. Because of those photos, we quickly decided that it was necessary to talk to Randolph, which is why the detectives are here now. Am I going to be arrested? It's hard to say right now. We need to take you to the station for questioning, and then we'll see where things stand. With 3 detectives standing right there, Randolph must have realized that resisting was pointless. He quietly went with the officers to the police station. I'm sorry this happened so suddenly. As a detective, I couldn't overlook this.
I understand, Patrick. Both you and Dad are detectives, so I know how things work. Even though it's a shock that Randolph committed these crimes, you separated me from someone who was hiding such awful things.
Ideally, a wife should believe in her husband's innocence. However, with them both being police officers, I knew what it meant when the police took someone away. So, that's what it is. There are still many things I don't understand, but we'll figure out the details as we go along. I took Patrick inside and had him explain what would happen next. The next day, I received a call informing me that Randolph had been arrested. Randolph had been going out for dinners and early morning fishing or golf trips to build relationships with clients. While he did go out with clients sometimes, it seems he was also lying to me and committing sexual crimes. He would hide behind cars and jump out naked in front of women walking late at night, or touch high school girls' chests as he passed by them. There were other things I can't even speak about, and it seems he even committed burglary. There were over 30 known victims. He was a habitual offender, and it's believed there are still more undiscovered crimes. I never imagined that the culprit of the molestation incidents in our neighborhood was my husband. The fact that he treated our intimate moments like a chore now made sense. He was fulfilling his desires through these crimes. I also understood why he avoided visiting my family and acted strange when Patrick said he was coming over. However, it was also true that Randolph worked seriously and achieved results at his job. Additionally, though it's embarrassing to say, he had me as his wife even without committing those crimes. I asked Patrick why Randolph continued to commit sexual crimes. Sex crimes aren't always about sexual desire. Many people commit them to satisfy a need for control. Control. Now that you mention it, he did want to be in a higher position at work and act like a domineering husband. He certainly had a strong desire for control. But how does that connect to sexual crimes? By causing pain to their victims, they feel like they're controlling them. Also, since they don't physically injure or steal from the victims, some don't feel guilty, making it easier for them to become repeat offenders. They're seriously hurting the victims. Yeah, that's how we see it. But some people don't think that way. They might think, at least it's not physical violence. Plus, they understand it's a crime, so they get a thrill from thinking they're clever for not getting caught. So, it's more about experiencing a thrill than satisfying sexual desire. I've heard that shoplifters often steal not for the items, but for the thrill. The psychology of criminals is quite complicated. That thrill is problematic because it can become addictive, increasing the frequency of their crimes. But I can't believe he would do such things. That's exactly it. People with a desire for control often have high abilities or leadership roles that allow them to control others to some extent. They can be seen as capable and serious by those around them. So, when they're caught, it's common for people to say, "I can't believe someone like them would do such a thing." Listening to him, I realized my reaction was just as expected. After his arrest, Randolph apparently reached settlements with the victims. By settling and showing remorse, he hoped for a lighter sentence. However, according to Patrick, the number of cases was too high for a slightly reduced sentence to avoid imprisonment. Moreover, the settlement amounts ranged from $2,000 to $3,000 per case, and with the current 30 known cases, he had lost all his money and would likely spend his days in prison. Not everyone received a settlement, but Randolph has lost all his money and will soon be facing prison time. I'm preparing for the divorce. Apparently, you can get divorced even while the other person is in prison. Through this marriage, I realized that I don't have good judgment when it comes to men. Therefore, from now on, I will focus more on my work rather than on relationships or marriage. I'm going to erase you from this world. Stay out of Dad's and my way. Mary's face, illuminated by the streetlights, was filled with rage. She slowly approached me, wildly waving the knife clutched in her hand. The night breeze blew, tousling our hair. "Stop, please!" I pleaded, but Mary wouldn't stop. I never thought a day like this would come. I thought I had been as cautious as possible, but now I found myself cornered. "Please, calm down. Don't you think Dad would be heartbroken if he knew about this?" "No, he wouldn't." "Heartbroken? Are you kidding me?" "He'd be thrilled." It seemed that no matter what I said to Mary, it was useless. Right now, all she could think about was killing me. Mary slowly approached me. I took one step back, then another. I couldn't stall any longer. The only thing left to do was to resist somehow. The moment I made up my mind, the rooftop door swung open with a loud bang. My name is Sarah, and I'm 40 years old. When I was diagnosed with endometriosis at the age of 20, my life changed dramatically. After having a hysterectomy, I could no longer have children of my own, and I spent days feeling depressed. I stopped dreaming about having a happy marriage with someone I loved, a vague hope I had harbored until then. "You did nothing wrong." My parents tried to console me. "It's the disease that's to blame. It's not the fault of the person who gets sick." But their words didn't reach me. I strongly blamed myself for losing my uterus. I felt like I had a fatal flaw as a woman. A turning point came when I was 38. A friend introduced me to a man. Anthony was a handsome businessman, 2 years older than me. "Sarah, if it's okay with you, would you consider dating me with the intention of getting married? Is someone like me really good enough? Actually, I've heard about your infertility. It doesn't bother me. Besides, I have a daughter who's about to start middle school." I had already heard from a friend that Anthony had a child. His wife had apparently fallen from the balcony of their high-rise apartment and passed away the year before last, in the fall. He felt that he needed a partner to share his life with, especially for the sake of his teenage daughter. It was with this in mind that Anthony had decided to remarry. I was thrilled at the prospect. Having my own family and becoming a parent seemed like a dream come true. After accepting his proposal and dating for about 6 months, I married Anthony. I was happy to have such a wonderful, hardworking husband. I remember feeling that way from the bottom of my heart. Anthony also seemed overjoyed to be married to me. The only one who wasn't happy was Mary. It was the same when we went to greet my relatives. Mary said something shocking that froze the atmosphere. Even without getting married, I was fine with just Dad and me. Mary! How can you say something so rude again? But that's how I really feel. This marriage is just a nuisance, you know? Mary's blunt attitude was bound to leave a bad impression. Please forgive her, she's at a difficult age. I tried to smooth things over. In fact, Mary was a tough daughter to handle. She had apparently been against Dad's remarriage all along. Don't you feel sorry for Mom in heaven? Mary would always blame Anthony. It was the same the day before we officially registered our marriage. As if I didn't even exist. Mom must be crying in heaven. You don't need to remarry. I can handle the housework myself. Why can't we just live as father and daughter? She screamed, giving Dad a hard time. I was perplexed too. If I wasn't welcome, I didn't want to get married. If Anthony hadn't strongly pursued me, I probably would have turned him down. Mary's going to be busy with school from now on. I want you to focus on your club activities too. I want you to cherish your own time without worrying about the house. That's why. You're remarrying for that reason. Then why not just hire a housekeeper or something? It's for Dad's sake too. I want a partner to share my life with, for the long road ahead. Sarah agreed to marry me feeling the same way. Please understand. Anthony pleaded, but Mary just puffed out her cheeks in dissatisfaction. She really seemed to dislike my presence. I remember feeling incredibly uncomfortable. Would we really be able to get along as a family in the future? I was filled with anxiety. Living with a teenage girl requires a lot of care and attention. I realized that painfully and felt more than a little regret. Mary was even more difficult to handle than I had imagined. She ignored my greetings. She wouldn't respond when I tried to talk to her. And she often glared at me, with a terrifyingly scary look in her eyes. I heard Anthony scold her countless times when he couldn't stand it anymore. Mary, stop glaring like that. She's your mom, after all. Whose mom? My mom is in heaven. Are you saying that again? I suppose that may be true, but... It's okay, Anthony. It is the truth. Don't blame Mary. I think we can gradually come to understand each other. We have plenty of time, after all. It was too naive to think we could hit it off right away. If I were in my daughter's position, how would I feel? If I wanted to improve our relationship, I had no choice but to take my time. I made up my mind and decided not to dwell on it even when Mary was cold to me. Even when she looked at me with hostile eyes, even when she complained to my face, I endured it with a smile. Mary's strong-willed nature was the real deal. She would get competitive with me at every turn. She tried to outdo me in every way, from cooking skills to cleaning efficiency. Hey Dad, look at the omelet I made. It's way better than a certain someone's, right? By a certain someone, do you mean Mom? Mary, I told you to stop trying to compare like that, didn't I? There's no point in comparing. Why? I'm proving that we'd be fine without this person around. Why can't you understand that? You're so stubborn, Dad. Mary. Stop pointing at Mom and calling her this person. Mary was still in middle school. It was only natural for her to be emotionally unstable at times. Getting angry or reacting emotionally was out of the question. I needed to handle this like an adult and take my time to get closer to her. I told Anthony that whenever an issue came up, I'll be fine, so don't worry. I assured him. It must have been about 6 months after we got married. A big change came. Mary started smiling at me. Where did that sharp, hostile look in her eyes go. She would come up to me with a smile. "Good morning, Mom." And she say. My feelings had finally gotten through to her. I was genuinely happy. But it didn't take long for me to realize that her kindness was only superficial. "Mom, I'll help you prepare dinner too. Can I cut the carrots into small pieces?" "Sure, thanks. We're making stew, so cut the carrots a bit larger." "Oh. Oops, sorry. My hand slipped." "It's okay. Just make sure to grip the knife tightly." The knife had slipped out of Mary's hand and come flying towards me. I barely managed to dodge it, but one wrong move and I could have been seriously injured. Other times, kitchen scissors fell on my foot, or I almost got splashed with boiling water. I wanted to pat myself on the back for escaping unscathed. The worst was when I noticed something off about my drink. One holiday, when I was about to drink the coffee Mary had made for me, I smelled a distinctive citrusy scent. "Huh? This is... Hey, Anthony. Don't you think this coffee smells weird? We didn't change the beans, did we?" You're right, it does smell strange. But the one I'm drinking is fine." "Oh, sorry. It's probably my fault. I might have poured the coffee into Mom's cup without rinsing it properly after washing it. I'll brew a new one right away." "Oh, it's okay. Thanks, Mary. I can make it myself, don't worry." "Oh, really?" Mary said with a smile. But to me, that smile looked somehow sinister. Mary had likely mixed detergent into my coffee. It couldn't have just been a case of forgetting to rinse. She must have been disappointed that I didn't take a single sip. I was constantly on edge, not knowing what Mary might do to me. Sometimes I just wanted to be alone and give my mind a rest. One Saturday afternoon, I walked into my favorite cafe. I was happy to be married, but spending every day with Mary was too mentally draining. Anthony being on my side was my only saving grace. How long would these days go on? As I sipped my coffee, lost in thought, I sighed again and again. I'm not sure how long I sat there like that. Before I knew it, a customer had taken a seat behind the partition. The voice sounded an awful lot like Mary's, and I couldn't help but prick up my ears. It's just the worst. Nothing I do works out. I want to get the better of her just once. I wonder why. Maybe it's because I keep failing. Don't rush, Mary. These things take patience. Always smile and lure your opponent into letting their guard down. Take your time and do it carefully. Let's open Dad's eyes. You're right. Absolutely. Thanks, Linda. There was no mistake. One of them was Mary. But who was this Linda person? Judging from her voice, she seemed to be an adult woman. Thanks to the partition, the two hadn't noticed my presence. The content of their conversation was truly terrifying. They were discussing specific ways to drive me to divorce. If I continued this marriage, my life could be in danger. I should get a divorce right away. They were trying to make me think that somehow involuntarily propose a divorce. That night, when Anthony and I were alone, I talked to him about Mary and this woman named Linda. And that's the story. Anthony, do you know anything about someone named Linda? Linda. I hate to think it, but... Anthony seemed to have an idea. He turned pale upon hearing the contents of their conversation. I'll try to casually ask her about it. Anthony promised me. Anyway, we have to avoid anything that could put Sarah's life in danger. Be as careful as possible around knives, things you put in your mouth, high places, walking on the street, things like that. Yeah, I will. It'd be scary if something happened. At the same time, I decided to investigate the other person on my own. I couldn't just sit back and take it. I had to be proactive in protecting myself. If something were to happen to me, there was a possibility that Mary and this Linda woman could become criminals. Linda aside, I wanted to protect Mary. That was my maternal instinct. A few days after that conversation, I got a message from Anthony saying, "I have to work late." Then, after dinner, Mary invited me up to the rooftop. Apparently, she had heard from a friend that we could see a meteor shower tonight.
We can see a meteor shower? I haven't heard anything about that. There don't seem to be any articles about it on news sites either. Let's just go and see.
The rooftop of this high-rise condo is finally open to residents.
It'd be a waste not to go.
Right. Unable to refuse her forceful invitation, I headed to the rooftop with Mary. The city lights from the 25th floor looked beautiful, even on an ordinary night. But I didn't let my guard down. I had to be careful around high places. I tried to stay as far away from the fence as possible. Then, Mary gradually grew impatient.
Mom, come over here. The night view from here is really gorgeous too. Thanks. But I'm fine, I can see it well from here. Hey, I'm telling you to come here. Don't you get it?
Mary's voice lowered. Before I knew it, Mary was holding a knife in her hand. She spread her arms wide and slowly approached me. The Mary who had transformed discarded her fake kindness and revealed her true nature.
I'm going to erase you from this world. Stay out of Dad's and my way.
The night breeze blew, tousling our hair. Mary's face, illuminated by the streetlights, was filled with rage.
Stop, please.
No matter how much I pleaded, Mary wouldn't stop.
Please calm down. Don't you think Dad would be heartbroken if he knew about this? No, he wouldn't. Heartbroken? Are you kidding me? He'd be thrilled.
It seemed that no matter what I said to Mary, it was useless. Right now, all she could think about was killing me. Mary slowly approached me. I took one step back, then another. I couldn't stall any longer. The only thing left to do was to resist somehow. The moment I made up my mind, the rooftop door swung open with a loud bang.
Stop it, Mary! Get away from Sarah! Dad! How did you?
I had actually texted Anthony that Mary had invited me to the rooftop. Her behavior was unusual, and going somewhere high up was far too dangerous.
I'll be home soon, so don't let your guard down.
He had replied. Anthony came running over and stood behind me.
Move!
Mary screamed. The tip of the knife was shaking. Her eyes were crazed. She charged at us, knife raised overhead. While shielding me, Anthony caught Mary as she swung the knife around and pushed her towards the fence. And then, to our shock, the fence came loose with a small clatter.
Ah! No! Mary!
It all happened in an instant. Mary, falling into the darkness below. The merciless sound of impact echoing through the high-rise condo's garden. We immediately called the police and an ambulance. But sadly, Mary couldn't be saved. Anthony, though clearly in agony, fulfilled his role as the family representative admirably. Many people rushed to attend Mary's funeral, friends, teachers, and more. Mary, who was always cheerful, frank, and popular at school. I deeply regretted not being able to save Mary before she lost her sanity. About a week after Mary's funeral, I called Linda to meet me at a cafe. She seemed surprised to hear from me. Of course she would be. No one would expect to get a call directly from a colleague's wife. That's right, this Linda who had been secretly encouraging Mary was Anthony's coworker. When Linda arrived right on time,
Nice to meet you.
I greeted her with a simple,
Mary seemed to be very close with you while she was alive. Huh? Oh, my condolences. She still had so much ahead of her. It's just...
yes, it's tragic. A fall from 100 meters up. Apparently, the wire fence had come unhooked and the bolts on the posts had come loose. That fence Mary had leaned her weight against that day. It had been rigged to come off with just a bit of force. And not just in one spot, it seems the fences all across the rooftop were in that dangerous state. Mary must have been trying to corner me against that fence while threatening me with a knife. And by some cruel twist of fate, she ended up being the one to lean on the broken fence. It was truly a nightmarish event. You're the one who tampered with the fences on that rooftop, aren't you, Linda?
What? How could I have? I'm an outsider. I can't get into the building. Couldn't Mary have let you in? It'd be easy to get in then, right? You were conspiring with Mary to kill me. Isn't that right? Come clean and tell me everything. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't go accusing me. Who do you think you are? Isn't this a bit rude to say to someone you just met? You're out of line.
Linda was defiant. She denied ever even meeting with Mary. She claimed that she had only heard about her a few times from Anthony and had never directly interacted with Mary herself. How dishonest. It had to be a lie. I clearly remembered Linda's voice as she spoke with Mary.
Stop spouting nonsense. You met with Mary many times. You advised her, encouraged her, didn't you? Telling her to try threatening me with a knife, to try putting detergent in my coffee. You were trying to psychologically corner me into filing for divorce, weren't you? Can you please stop? I don't know anything. If you don't cut it out, I'll call the police.
Go ahead, call them. And while you're at it, confess that you're deeply involved in Mary's death. Do you really think I'm saying this without knowing anything? I called you here after thoroughly investigating you.
Investigated me?
Linda had feelings for Anthony. This was revealed by the detective I hired. Information from several of Linda's colleagues confirmed it. After Anthony's first wife passed away, Linda aimed to become his new wife. Unfortunately for Linda, I became the second wife instead. Frustrated, Linda secretly approached Mary, trying to win her over first. She noticed the darkness in Mary's heart and gave her advice to get rid of me. But in the end, Mary's plans backfired and she took her own life. Isn't that right?
No, it's not. I had nothing to do with it. Stop accusing me. Nothing to do with it? Stop lying. It's all written in Mary's diary. Linda, it details the advice you gave her. A diary? What are you talking about?
Mary kept a diary. I think it's only natural for Linda to be surprised. Even Anthony and I didn't know she had one. It detailed her meetings and conversations with Linda. Anthony and I found the diary while sorting through her belongings and were shocked. Linda's instructions were specific and horrifying. Telling her to put foreign objects in our food is not something a sane person would advise.
Moreover, the cafe's security cameras should have recorded you meeting with Mary. Matching the diary's dates will increase the credibility. The police will see that you advised Mary multiple times, trying to corner me. Please, don't call the police.
Why not? Weren't you the one who suggested it? Mary's diary also mentioned the day Linda was invited to our condo. The two of them took time to tamper with the fence, planning my fall. That alone makes Linda's actions criminal. It's a case of property damage. The penalties for property damage include long-term imprisonment or hefty fines. When I explained this to Linda, she turned pale.
You encouraged Mary to commit a crime. You must acknowledge that. Because of you, Mary ended up losing her life, and you can't deny your responsibility. But I just gave advice. I didn't actually do anything, so I can't be responsible. Have you heard of incitement? It's not just the person who commits the crime, but also the one who persuades or guides them to do it who is culpable. They face the same penalties as the perpetrator.
I thought pushing her this far would make her confess. But I was wrong. Linda was surprisingly persistent. She denied having any interactions with Mary about committing crimes.
That diary is full of lies. I never talked to Mary about anything illegal. I swear. I was just giving her advice about her love life. Love life? What do you mean? Mary was in love. I was just supporting her. I never discussed any crimes like the diary says.
Really? Can you swear that's the absolute truth?
It's the truth.
Linda insisted. She said Mary was in love with a boy from her school. This was the first I heard of it. It was obviously a lie. Linda was so naive. She didn't understand how cornered she really was. If she thought Mary's diary was the only evidence we had, she was sorely mistaken. I fiddled with my phone and played a recording of Mary's voice. Failed again.
That old hag is really sensitive to smells.
I put bleach in her coffee, but she threw it out right away. So annoying.
Yeah, the first time you put detergent in the coffee and failed, it made her suspicious. You need to be more careful next time.
It was a conversation between Linda and Mary. Linda's face showed pure shock. She couldn't believe such a recording existed. She had no idea we had investigated her so thoroughly. I hired a private investigator to look into every detail about you. Linda, what did you just say?
That you never discussed any crimes with Mary, right? Well, that might have been a lapse in memory.
A lapse in memory? How do you confuse talking about putting bleach and detergent in coffee? Please, explain.
Well, we talked about removing coffee stains. I guess the memories got mixed up.
Linda's pathetic excuses infuriated me. Her deceit was infuriating. Linda had pushed Mary over the edge. Her guilt was enormous. Even if the world forgave her, Anthony and I never would. At that moment, a shadow appeared silently. Someone stood right behind Linda. A deep, ominous voice made Linda flinch.
You lying woman. You are definitely partly to blame for Mary's death. Do you understand that? I will hate you forever, Linda. I will never forgive you. Never. Anthony, how long have you been there? No, it's not what you think.
Linda turned around, her face turning pale. She saw Anthony's exhausted face. It was no wonder he looked so worn out. After all, he lost his daughter right in front of him. And it was triggered by his own contact with her. No amount of regret could ever be enough. Even after the funeral, Anthony continued to suffer. He had nightmares every night. He seemed to relive the moment he lost his precious daughter over and over in his dreams. Sitting beside me, Anthony looked up at Linda.
Linda, do you have any idea what it feels like for a parent to lose their child right in front of them? Anthony, I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't going to cut it. Do you think saying sorry will make everything okay? Give me back Mary. We had our problems, but she was still my daughter.
Anthony already knew Linda had tampered with the fence. If it weren't for that, Mary might still be alive today. And if she were alive, maybe we could have eventually reconciled. But that possibility was taken away from our family. Thinking about Anthony's pain, I couldn't stop my own tears. Linda, I deeply regret ever introducing you to Mary. If that hadn't happened, she wouldn't have kept in touch with you.
I'm sorry. I'm sick of hearing apologies. Can't you say something more meaningful? I don't know how to apologize properly. I'm sorry.
All she could do was beg for forgiveness. Linda was finally retracting her excuses and admitting her involvement. Just in case, I quietly started the voice recorder app on my phone.
Do you understand how much I have suffered? Sure, my wife and Mary didn't get along. But we were trying to resolve it in our own way. Yes. I understand. I really do. Understand? That's rich. You meddled in another family's issues and made things worse with your words. You caused the worst possible outcome.
Yes. Anthony, you're right. Linda started to cry softly, looking down and sniffling. Tears ran down her cheeks. Linda herself seemed to be perplexed by this incident. It was a little late, but I could sense that from her demeanor. I loved you. I loved Anthony.
What did you say?
I loved Anthony. I wanted to marry you. But you chose someone else, not me. That made me so angry.
So, you decided to destroy our family? That's horrible. You're so selfish. When you love someone, you should want them to be happy.
Linda started crying again. It was understandable after being harshly criticized by the person she loved. I felt my role here was done. There was no new testimony to gain. I urged Linda to go to the police. I will, she said, nodding while crying. After that, Linda turned herself in at the police station. She was later fined for criminal property damage and other charges. We also filed a claim for damages against Linda. Losing Mary caused us immense emotional pain. Linda needed to make amends for her role in that. When questioned by the police, Linda admitted to her connection with Mary and their shared goal of getting rid of me. Mary's diary and the investigators' findings backed up Linda's words. If Linda and Mary had been bolder and more ruthless, who knows what might have happened to me? They could have hired someone to attack me or used other methods. No matter how cautious I was, I couldn't avoid all dangers. I felt incredibly lucky to be alive. A few days later, Linda resigned from her job for personal reasons. Apparently, she couldn't stand the cold stares from her colleagues. Linda, now in debt from the damages, spent her days repaying it. She currently works part-time at a grocery store in a small town in South Carolina. Mary's obsessive attachment to Dad and her hostility towards me became clearer. Anthony found a theory that seemed to explain it. Mary likely had an Electra complex. Anthony sighed. An Electra complex? What is that? Is it a disease? It's not a disease. It's when a young girl feels exclusive love for her dad and develops strong rivalry with her mom. Mary might have had an extreme case of it. That makes a lot of sense. An Electra complex. It describes a psychological state, not a mental illness. Anthony emphasized that point. Even I have a normal amount of affection for Dad. In Mary's case, she must have unknowingly let those feelings escalate. It's something that could happen to anyone. That child did nothing wrong. I prayed once again for Mary's soul. Surprisingly, it was my relatives who actively supported Anthony's heart after losing Mary. Anthony's actions in trying to protect me, his wife, were completely justified. They affirmed the wounded Anthony wholeheartedly, saying those words. They even encouraged him about pushing Mary, saying it was self-defense. I believe it's precisely because of such support from those around him that Anthony was able to recover to how he is now. Anthony and I now spend peaceful days together, just the two of us. The wounds in our hearts may never heal completely. But it's because we're like this that it's important to be conscious of supporting each other. There will likely be many painful things in the future too, but as a married couple, we want to join our strength and overcome them. We want to protect each other's hearts so that we can smile as much as possible. That's what I believe.
I don't celebrate my wife's birthday. But you, my fiancé, are special.
I'm so happy. And we're staying in a suite at the hotel tonight, right?
Their conversation, so absorbed in their own world, would normally be something I'd listen to with a smile. But it's different when the man in the conversation is my husband.
And what did he just say? Fiancé?
The words hit me like a slap in the face. My husband, Colton, had the audacity to bring his affair to the French restaurant where I work. There's no way I'm letting them leave quietly.
Manager, I have a request.
Imagining what was about to happen, I couldn't help but smirk to myself. My name is Sadie, and I'm 36 years old. Winter is always a tough season for me, not just because of household chores but also because of my job, which involves working with water and hot liquids. My hands get so chapped and dry. When I was younger, I didn't need hand cream, but now, no matter how much I apply, it's never enough. I have to work hard to prevent my hands from cracking and bleeding. I work at a French restaurant. I started at a chain, moved to a hotel restaurant, and then to a high-end French restaurant, gaining experience and training along the way. I'm not just a server or a hostess, I'm a chef who creates French cuisine. My husband, Colton, whom I married 5 years ago, works for a trading company. We met through a mutual friend, or to put it simply, at a mixer. A friend from college, who was dating someone in the trading company, invited me to a party where some of his colleagues would be. Concerned that I, always busy with work, had no chance to meet anyone, my friend thought this might be a good opportunity. As someone who works in the food industry, I rarely meet men in suits. They all looked sharp in their business attire, and their conversations were filled with wit and humor. I was easily charmed, especially by Colton, who was seated across from me. We hit it off immediately and exchanged contact information before the night was over. He asked me out to dinner soon after, and our relationship progressed smoothly. Even though I work most weekends, and his job involves a lot of travel, he would take days off to match my schedule. Our relationship thrived against all odds. When he brought up the topic of marriage, I held back my eagerness and told him my honest feelings.
I want to continue working. I've worked hard to get to where I am, and I'm finally being given more responsibilities. I'll do my best to handle the household too, but I might not be the best wife to support your busy lifestyle.
Knowing how demanding his job at the major trading company was. To my surprise, he just laughed it off.
I'm not looking for a housewife, Sadie. I travel a lot and have many work commitments. I'd prefer if we respected each other's time. I believe we can be that kind of couple, and I admire your dedication to your work.
Colton. Hearing that makes me so happy. We really were doing well. I had heard about how he had been exhausted by a clingy ex-girlfriend. At work, I wouldn't contact him unless necessary, and I never pried into his affairs. I guess I was just too busy myself. So, we got married and didn't change our lifestyles much. We were both busy with work, but living together meant we could see each other when we got home. We managed to synchronize our days off to go out together. Even after we got married, Colton would always bring me flowers or gifts for my birthday and our anniversaries. He was great at planning surprises, and though I always wanted to surprise him back, I'd end up asking, "What do you want?" In that way, even though we were often too busy to do household chores properly, and sometimes even fought, we were enjoying a happy married life. About 3 years after we got married, as we were enjoying a drink together, Colton suddenly said,
Sadie, don't you think it's about time we had a child?
"What?" We didn't have any children yet. Of course, I did want children, but I was prioritizing my career and leaving it to nature. To put it more frankly, I was subconsciously delaying it, thinking it would be inconvenient to have a child right now and that it would be better to wait a little longer. I also want to have children, but...
Right. If it's been 3 years and nothing's happened, maybe we should get some tests done. Considering our age, maybe you should ease up on work a bit, Sadie, and we can go to the hospital if necessary. I'll support you, of course.
It would be a blessing to have a man talk about this so openly. I understood this because I had heard various stories from my friends, but at that time, I had just been made the leader of the hors d'oeuvre section at the restaurant I worked at. Yes, I think that would be good. But could you wait a little longer? I've just been recognized as independent and given this position, so I can't leave work right now.
I see. I understand.
Seeing Colton's disappointed look, I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. When things settle down, I'll slow down at work and think about it. Besides, we might get lucky and conceive in the meantime.
Right. There are times when work is important.
Thank you, I said, grateful for Colton's understanding. And then I got so busy that I almost forgot about that conversation, and about half a year later, it happened. I was bringing a towel to Colton, who was in the shower, when I heard a vibrating sound. It was coming from Colton's cell phone, which was placed along with his clothes. Did he usually bring it into the bathroom? I thought for a moment, but figured he must have left it in his pocket and didn't think much of it. Just as I was about to leave the living room, the vibration sounded again, several times in a row. I turned around involuntarily, and the phone's screen lit up with a notification. Michelle.
Thanks for the treat today. Next time.
That's all it showed, but my heart jumped. I hurried out of the bathroom, but even drinking water in the kitchen didn't calm my pounding heart.
The sender was displayed as Michelle, and that heart mark, it was clearly from a woman. He said he was at an office party today, but was it one of the women there?
But, as I was brooding, he came out.
Oh? What's wrong?
Sensing something was off with me, he asked. I thought it was now or never, and calmly opened my mouth. When I brought the towel earlier, your phone was ringing quite a bit. Maybe it's something urgent?
What?
With a towel in his right hand and his phone in his left, Colton stopped for a moment at my words and quickly operated his phone. I watched his face intently, but whether intentionally or unconsciously, his expression didn't change. Who was it? Is everything okay with work?
Oh, it was a colleague. The director and I paid for today's office party, so it's a thank you message.
Wow. That's a thoughtful colleague.
These days, young people rarely attend office parties, so sometimes we treat them or try to communicate with them. It's tough.
I've heard that before. Is it Gen Z?
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't really understand the term Gen Z, but I said it anyway. Colton was laughing, and everything seemed as usual. But my intuition was telling me something. I could sense it. The message couldn't just be a thank you from a subordinate.
Thank you for the meal today.
Today too, which means the other person has been treated by him before. I can't tell what the word next time means, but it seems like they have plans to meet again. The heart mark stuck in my head, and my heart was restless. From that day on, while continuing my usual life, I began to look at Colton's actions with suspicion. As always, he had many overnight business trips and client entertainments. But those were originally there, so I couldn't tell if they had particularly increased recently. Maybe I hadn't been paying much attention to Colton until now. I trusted him, but I also couldn't deny that I was preoccupied with my own work. One thing that was clear was that he started keeping his mobile phone close to him at all times. I struggled with the idea of checking his phone while he was in the shower or sleeping, but I couldn't do it. It would probably be locked anyway. On one hand, I wanted to believe him, but on the other hand, I noticed changes in Colton when I thought about it. Now that I think about it, there haven't been any birthday or anniversary presents or surprises for the past year. It's not that I wanted things, so I didn't pay much attention, but Colton never missed an event, no matter how busy he was. Now doubts started to arise. Even at work, I couldn't help but think about various things and couldn't concentrate. I couldn't stand living with this unsettled feeling. I decided to go to Colton's company on my day off. I didn't know if I would be able to catch him at the right time. He is often out, so I didn't know if he would be at the company. Feeling empty about what I was doing, I sat in a cafe across from his company, drinking coffee. In the evening, Colton came out alone. He had his mobile phone to his ear, seemingly on a call. When the call ended, he walked towards the bus terminal. I hurriedly left the cafe. For some reason, he walked past the bus terminal. After walking for a while, he hailed a taxi. Then, out of nowhere, a woman with long hair quickly got into the taxi. He quickly followed, and the taxi drove off. As the taxi passed by, I saw the two of them closely huddled together, and I was stunned. No matter how you looked at it, they seemed like lovers. Even though I had a hunch, seeing it with my own eyes was shocking, and I walked to the bus terminal in a daze. After calming down a bit at home, I sent Colton a message.
What time will you be done today? How about having dinner out together for a change?
Sorry, I have a dinner meeting with the director and a client today. I'll be late, so go ahead and sleep.
Oh, so that person is a client.
No way!
How long have I been deceived like this? This makes all the business trips and everything else suspicious. Amidst the swirling anger and sadness, I thought about what I should do from now on. 3 months later, I was working as usual.
2 guests with a reservation for the private room.
The madam in charge of the reception said,
Welcome!
and the owner said, The French restaurant where I work has 2 table seats besides the counter and 1 private room. We charge a private room fee, so reservations are rare, but it's popular with celebrities who want to be discreet.
Hey, this place is expensive, and you got a private room too? That's amazing.
Of course. I don't celebrate my wife's birthday, but my fiancé, you are special.
Oh, I'm so happy. And we have a suite room at the hotel later, right?
Of course.
Cole, I love you.
The words coming from the private room almost made me gasp out loud. I wanted to congratulate myself for holding it in. The voice was unmistakably Colton's. The woman called Michelle was undoubtedly his mistress.
What did she say? Fiancé?
I was speechless.
To think he would bring a date to the restaurant where I work. What was he thinking? I had told him I moved to this restaurant, but did he not hear or just forget? It's clear he doesn't care about me at all anymore.
That realization solidified my resolve.
Hey, are you feeling okay? You look pale.
The owner noticed I had stopped moving and called out to me. I'm fine. Boss, I have a request.
What's up? What's going on?
When the madam who had just delivered the aperitifs to the private room returned, the owner whispered something to her. Looking surprised, she turned to me, and after meeting my eyes, she nodded slowly. Soon after, the madam brought the appetizers to the private room, and a loud voice followed shortly.
Spicy! Water! I need water!
What's wrong, Cole?
Hey, madam! Did the owner make this appetizer? Call him over!
Colton's voice echoed. I headed to the private room. Is there a problem with your appetizer? I made it myself.
What's with this? Did you mix up the amount of horseradish? Get the owner to make it. This is a special dinner.
Oh? What's the occasion?
Huh? That's none of your business. Well, what?
Finally turning to face me properly, Colton froze the moment he saw my face.
Well, why are you?
He opened and closed his mouth, but couldn't continue.
What's wrong, Cole? I thought you liked horseradish.
You do like horseradish, don't you? Our restaurant takes pride in our horseradish, which we source from Madison County.
Wow, from Madison County. Are you the chef? That's so cool.
Not recognizing me, Michelle cheerfully commented. Thank you. How does it taste?
Oh, it's delicious. He booked this famous place for my birthday.
That's wonderful. I gave Michelle a professional smile, then looked at Colton with the same smile. She says it's delicious, but does it not suit your taste?
No. It's very tasty.
Whether he was scared of my professional demeanor or thought it best not to provoke me, Colton responded awkwardly. That's good to hear. We have a special course continuing after this, so please enjoy it.
Of course. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Are you okay? You don't look well.
No, I'm just a bit nervous at such a fancy place.
Really? The always confident Cole, nervous? You must have done it for me. I'm so happy.
Haha.
Sweating and with a strained laugh, Colton was struggling. From there, it was a spectacle. The dishes that followed were all of high quality, but only Colton's were laden with horseradish, cleverly hidden so as not to be immediately obvious. Though I felt like doing the same to his mistress, causing a scene with both of them would be too much. I wanted to minimize the trouble for the restaurant. While she enjoyed the food, exclaiming how delicious it was, Colton choked down his meal with teary eyes, asking for water repeatedly. Well, you sure do go all out for her. Don't fill up on water, it'll be a waste. As I carried the dishes to the private room instead of the madam, I said this with a smile and poured piping hot water, not hot enough to burn, but enough to warm.
Hot. Huff, huff. Ouch.
What's wrong?
You.
Just as Colton finally glared at me and opened his mouth to speak, the owner made an appearance.
The foie gras today is exquisite, the best we've had recently. And the filet mignon is also top-notch. How about it?
Oh wow. The owner's here, Cole. The foie gras just melts. Everything is so delicious, right?
Michelle, who looks like she's in her 20s, seemed to be enjoying the high-end cuisine and was excited to meet the owner. Our owner is quite famous and has appeared in magazines and media numerous times, so a starstruck person like her might know him. As Michelle spoke cheerfully, Colton clammed up, and I took the opportunity to retreat. Then, I brought the final dish. Here you go. This is the last of the main courses. I'll bring the dessert next.
Okay.
What the hell is this?
In contrast to Michelle's smiling face, Colton glared at me. Well, I guess he would. The final dish was a mountain of horseradish instead of the expected delicacy.
You've got to be kidding me.
Colton finally shouted, and Michelle's eyes widened.
Cole.
Do you think you can get away with messing with a customer like this?
Please keep your voice down. You'll embarrass her as well.
Screw you.
Who's screwing with who?
As I changed my tone and glared back fiercely, Colton faltered.
Bringing your girlfriend to the restaurant where your wife works. What kind of nerve does that take?
What are you doing here? You don't work at a French restaurant like this.
I told you I got transferred here.
What? Did you?
You were probably too busy on your phone, half listening, preoccupied with her. Hey, Cole. What do you mean, wife? You mean this woman.
Michelle, it's not what it looks like.
Nice to meet you. I'm Colton's wife, Sadie. I turned to Michelle, smiled brightly, and greeted her.
What?
Michelle stared at me in shock.
Wait, really?
As Michelle's words sunk in, his face turned pale. He laughed nervously, sweat pouring down his face.
Hey! This isn't what you told me.
Michelle suddenly burst out in anger.
You said your wife was a lazy, unemployed woman who didn't do housework, and that's why you were separated. How is she unemployed?
No, Michelle, calm down.
Oh, so that's what you said. We've never been separated.
What? What do you mean? You told me you've been separated for a long time and are about to get divorced.
Michelle's once beautiful face now twisted in fury. It seems he had painted me as a difficult wife and lied about being separated. Realizing that I was indeed his wife and everything had come to light, Michelle suddenly tried to protect herself.
I was told you were separated. That your wife abandoned the house and the divorce was already decided, so,
Well, that's unfortunate for you. But you knew he was married when you got involved with him, didn't you? Taking taxis after leaving the office and meeting in private rooms like this is to avoid being seen, right? I don't know what Colton told you, but from my perspective, making excuses instead of apologizing makes you just as guilty. I'm sorry. Michelle averted her eyes awkwardly, offering a half-hearted apology. Now. I turned to face Colton, who was staring at me with a pale face. Ever since I found out you were meeting her under the pretense of business trips and client dinners, I've been gathering evidence for our divorce.
What?
If you were planning to divorce me too, that makes things simpler. But to think you'd come to our restaurant.
Sadie?
You booked a private room because you didn't want to be seen, right? Yet you were loudly celebrating, making it clear you're married. How foolish can you be?
What? You're the one who's unbearable. It's your fault for being cheated on. You're always prioritizing work and can't even have kids. Fine, I'm going to marry this young and cute Michelle and have children with her. I'll pay whatever the divorce settlement demands.
Sure. Since your infidelity is the cause, you'll be paying up.
Humph. In that case, I'll spread the word. Imagine the scandal of a famous French restaurant harassing people. This place will be finished. The owner will be dragged down too. Are you fine with that?
What a despicable man. I responded firmly to Colton, who had the nerve to deflect and blame me instead of apologizing.
Go ahead if you want. The owner made sure she was served the usual course. What I did was personal, directed only at you for your infidelity. I can explain it all and take full responsibility.
That was when.
Cut it out. Do you really want to lower your reputation any further as a man? What?
The voice of authority belonged to the owner.
Sadie told me it was her husband in the private room, and I was surprised. This woman has climbed up in the tough world of chefs without giving up, and yet you're cheating with a younger woman? Pathetic.
What?
Everyone here heard your words. For example, do you recognize this gentleman at the counter? What? Oh!
The man sitting there was a best-selling author known for his love of fine dining.
The writer here is furious about having his meal disturbed. But as a writer, he finds it amusing. He plans to use today's events in his magazine column and on the radio. You'll become quite famous. What?
Colton and Michelle's faces turned pale. Glaring at them, the owner continued as other guests shot cold looks their way.
Hey, stop it! I'm not involved. I'm done with him.
What? Wait a minute, Michelle. We're getting married, right? Sadie's getting a divorce, so there's no problem.
What? There's a huge problem. How could I trust a liar like you? Give me back my precious time.
Shouting this, she gave me a quick nod before fleeing the restaurant.
What? Michelle!
As Colton tried to chase after her, the owner grabbed his arm.
Hold on. What are you going to do? Ignore your wrongdoings and spread bad rumors about us? If you do, we have our own plans. Be prepared to face the consequences. Eek!
He trembled slightly under the owner's intense presence.
I won't do anything. I won't touch this store or Sadie, I swear.
His earlier bravado was nowhere to be seen, and his voice quivered pathetically.
If you harm Sadie any further during the divorce, I won't go easy on you. Some of your bosses are friends of mine, and they will come down here. Yes, I understand. I understand.
Finally, the owner released him, and he yelled,
Michelle!
and dashed out of the store. Here's what happened next. Colton and I successfully finalized our divorce. Ever since I first caught them together, the detective agency I hired had gathered plenty of evidence, and that day's incident was the last straw for Colton. He agreed to my terms, paying the alimony I demanded and dividing the assets as I wished. At first, I considered suing Michelle for damages too, but it wasn't necessary. She quit the company where both she and Colton worked and exposed their affair, leading to her own disgrace. She lost her job and friends at the company, suffering her own consequences without me lifting a finger. As for Colton, the revelation by Michelle also exposed everything at work. He had even called her to his business trips and charged their meetings to the company. As a result, he was demoted to a subsidiary factory rumored to be a harsh workplace. From an elite position, he found himself in a mentally and physically draining environment. Given the current strict corporate climate, he probably won't return to the main office. As for me, the customers who were present that day didn't get angry but instead offered me words of encouragement and support. Regular patrons who had seen me as a chef backed me up, and the store's reputation, as well as the owner's, remained untarnished, much to my relief. 2 years have passed since then, and now I have a new partner. Believe it or not, it's the owner's son. He's set to take over the restaurant one day, but 2 years ago, he was training at a place in Los Angeles. When he came back a year ago, We met and grew close, and naturally fell for each other over time. The owner and his wife have warmly supported our relationship. Life brings all kinds of experiences. The cold seasons can make loneliness and hardship feel even more intense. But I believe that enjoying good food can always lift your spirits. I hope to continue sharing happiness through the dishes I create with as many people as possible.